Hi, I'm Ernie Zor, and on behalf of Puritas Spring Software, I welcome you to the 10th in our series of frequently asked question videos. This one's about Basic Ohio Probate Forms version 8 and completing the forms necessary for filing a relief from administration. Now, the first thing to do is complete the general information worksheet. Now, that subject was covered in an earlier YouTube demonstration video, so I won't repeat that here. It's straightforward anyway. It's simply a worksheet for collecting basic stuff like names and addresses. You could see it on the screen right now. And I should mention that although I'm using BOPF 8, everything I say in this video also applies to our other county-specific probate applications. On the screen here, I've opened a file that I prepared earlier, and it has the general information worksheet already completed. Now, with that form, I'll scroll down here so you can see a little bit more. That's about it. With my general information worksheet completed, and if I'm working in the recommended order outlined in the left pane, I would be going from the general information worksheet to the next of kin worksheet. And I'm going to do that right now by clicking on the next of kin button. This example has no surviving spouse. The surviving kin are two daughters, one of whom you may have noticed is listed on the general information worksheet as the executrix. You can see that after the daughters, I've entered other businesses, creditors actually, into the kin worksheet. That's because the kin worksheet is for more than just kin. It's also for listing beneficiaries, legatees, creditors, and any other interested party. It's convenient to enter the creditors in the kin worksheet so that their names and addresses will flow to any of the required forms like notices and consents. And you can see that I've got the creditors checked off for Form 5.2 waiver and the Form 5.3 notice. If we were to click, for example, on the funeral services bill, you'd see that the check boxes for 5.2 and 5.3 are checked off, and that's all that's required. You put that name and address in one time, and it just goes wherever you tell it to go. And that's basically it for the next of kin worksheet. So I'm going to close it, and we're going to go to the asset worksheet, which I do by clicking on the asset worksheet button. And this is the step that differs a bit from what you may be used to when you're entering a full-blown probate. And here's why. In a normal probate, you'd enter each asset individually in the worksheet. If you had 3 bank accounts, you would make 3 entries in the worksheet, and forms like the inventory and the account, they have huge numbers of continuation pages that'll hold more assets than you'll ever need to handle. Well, by contrast, the relief from administration forms are designed differently from the standpoint that if an estate qualifies under the lesser values, it's kind of assumed that there are not going to be that many assets. And it's also assumed that you won't be needing lots of space or continuation pages. And just to prove it, I'm going to jump over to Form 5.1. Let's close the worksheet for a moment and go to Form 5.1. And you'll notice that for listing all of the assets, there's whatever there you see there, 22 lines, I believe. And there's the same number of lines for creditors on the back side. Form 5.6 is even stingier in terms you've got all the property has got to be summarized in the one text area, which constitutes about 1 vertical inch of space on the actual form. So if you were to enter an asset like you would in a full probate, you'd immediately run out of space. You'd receive an overflow error, probably after you've assigned only your first asset. So what are you supposed to do? Well, let's go back to the asset worksheet, and I'll show you. For one thing, keep your asset descriptions as short as possible. That should get you through Form 5.1. But we'll use a trick for Form 5.6, which I'll show you in a second. But first, let me caution you that once you've entered your asset descriptions and checked to send them to Form 5.1, it's important to select an asset category. Now, in the case of Form 5.1, there are 4 categories. It could be first vehicle to spouse, second vehicle to spouse, it could be real estate, or, which it usually is, the big catch-all category, other assets. Again, It's not simply enough to send an asset to Form 5.1. You've got to tell Basic Ohio Probate Forms what type of property it is, and you do that in the category dialog. And I'm going to show you that right now because you see I've already clicked on here, 5.1 and 5.6 are checked off. And let's go to the category one, and you'll see that for this 5.1, you can pull down the list. It'll have the appropriate category. We've chosen other. And you never have to memorize categories because the categories are unique to a particular form, and that's all listed in that box that we were just looking at. Now, the back side of Form 5.1 deals with expenses and debts, and we haven't looked at the expense worksheet yet, so we'll look at the back side of Form 5.1 in a moment. But first, while we're on the asset worksheet, let's get back to that issue about Form 5.6. The problem I mentioned a minute ago is that there's very little room for descriptions on 5.6, so the way you make things fit is to combine your asset descriptions. Let's look at this entry in the worksheet. You can see here that I've got 3 bank accounts: checking account, savings account, certificate of deposit. None of those am I sending to 5.6. Instead, I created a big, long entry with all 3 of them in there. You can see that all the information is there. Even the individual account valuations are in parentheses, and then the total I put in the value field. So that's how I get all those entries to squeeze into one vertical inch of space on Form 5.6. And really, when you think about it, it's pretty much the way you would do it if you were completing a form in a typewriter or if you were using a static PDF form at the court's website. No different. I've even entered the individual amounts in parentheses and used the grand total for the value field. Now, one basic thing to note is that Form 5.6 fields will take anything you send to them from the asset worksheet. So no matter what your probate court's preferred accounting method is, you should never find yourself saying, oh no, I can't do this or that, because whatever you put in the worksheet, that's going to go to those lines on Form 5.6. So there's literally nothing that you can't do. Actually, you can even forget the asset worksheet entirely and override the fields by entering the information directly on the form. I don't advise completing them that way. It can be done, and that's what they call a Q&D method, as they say. Now, looking over the worksheet, this estate has 3 bank accounts whose combined value is about $9,000, 2 vehicles, $15,000 and $12,500. Household goods, furniture, and furnishings valued at $5,000. A half interest in real estate valued at $44,000. And that is the entire asset worksheet. You can see for each of these assets, I've just checked off the box and or the category if it's required. And that's what causes everything to happen in terms of completing the forms. Everything? Well, maybe not everything, because we do have expenses, and I want to go quickly to the expense worksheet by clicking on the expense worksheet button there. And the only place this information ends up is on the back side of Form 5.1 as the schedule of liabilities. Remember, the back side of Form 5.1 has space for 22 lines of creditor information. Therefore, in making my entries, I condensed each one so it takes up only one line, like this. Let's see the first one there. Name of creditor, New Washington Funeral Services, Inc. Amount $5,000. Nature of debt, funeral expenses. I'm checking the box to send it to 5.1. Let's take a look at what we've got by filling out these three or four worksheets. And what I'll do is I'm going to close the worksheet, and I'm going to go to the print selection dialog, and I'm going to tell it, give me Form 5, 1, 2, 3, notice of publication. 5.6 is already checked. Let's just do those, and let's take a look at what it looks like. I need to move it into the screen there. There we go. I think I'm centered there. Pretty darn nice, if you don't, if I don't say so myself. Everything's filled out. Okay, that entry, I left that blank actually because sometimes the court fills that out. I could have completed it if I want. There's that schedule of assets all totaled up. Your court form's never going to do that sort of thing. Plus, if you make a change, the total updates instantaneously. But you see how nice that looks. There's your waiver. I think that you had so many people on the consent that I needed 2 pages, and the program did both of those pages, as you can see. And that's about it. I can scroll down to 5.6 if you want to take that. Let's see if we can jump down there. There we go. There's 5.6. And that's it. Now, as a parting comment, I can also tell you that if you're required to list a large number of assets of minimum value, that's not really a problem either. That just requires a bit of ingenuity. And what I have done or would do is to make the list, whether it's a list in my word processor, or a list that I created in Excel spreadsheet, or even an itemized statement of accounts that's been provided by an investment firm. I might just try to make an exhibit out of it and then incorporate it by reference as an exhibit. In other words, the entry in the asset worksheet might read something like this: 65 T-row price investment accounts, total value $24,000. See attached Exhibit A. Using that technique, I'm able to avoid a load of typing, but of course not all probate courts are the same when it comes to completing the standard forms. So you may even want to contact the clerk's office for more specific guidelines on relief from administration forms. Hopefully substance will triumph over form. And that's it for this video. I want to remind you that the new Puritas Springs book, The Best of Law Office Computing, is now available in paperback. It's got all the best law office computing tips from years of back issues, and I'm sure you'll find it both entertaining and the tips and hints useful. You can get the ebook at Amazon for only $9 and the paperback for only $12.99. Hey, again, this is Ernie for Puritas Springs Software, and I want to thank you for watching.